Hello, listeners, and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to look at the good, the bad, and the ridiculous of movies, either starring by or about pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker and artist, and I also regularly write for the Geek Show. And I'm joined this week by...
Hi, I'm back. I'm Jeff Pizek, and I'm a former newspaper writer in the Chicagoland area in the United States. And I am also found on Letterboxd as Scrambled Face. So that's where you could really find anything current I'm doing. So glad to be here, Graham.
Well, yes, it's a film that inspires a certain feeling of gratitude for being invited to talk about this, I think, because we had a few things in the fire, and I think we all appreciated that this was going to be the most fun.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Yeah. This is a movie I go back with to childhood. So for me, I'm glad to have the opportunity to discuss it.
It's interesting. It's not the first time I've seen it, but I hadn't seen it in childhood. I was always aware of it, and I thought my awareness of 9 to 5 passed through stages, and it seemed to be stages that were driven by how other people were talking about it. I remember that for a while, people talked about it like, oh yeah, it's a fun, guilty pleasure. And then after a while, it became, this is actually surprisingly, politically on it. It's got some good messages in it. And then you get to the point where we're at now, which is that it is one of the few successful Marxist texts to make it out of mainstream Hollywood.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, seeing it as a child, I appreciated the comedy and the energy and all that. But yeah, every time I've watched it since, I've gained a little bit more insight into like how smart the movie is. And I read something from the producers, co-star Jane Fonda, was really trying to make a point to not make it a preachy film, which is, I think, part of the power of it, because it doesn't do any grandstanding. It makes its points through the story it's telling. And we could get into that, I'm sure. But yeah, I think this most recent revisit to talk about it really drove that home for me, because it makes all its points without having to hit you over the head with them, I think.
And it's worth noting that it was meant to make points. It's not a film that people started writing and realized, oh, hey, there's a political subtext in this. The motivation for Jane Fonda doing this was that she had done a lot of research and a lot of activism with female office workers, and she had heard them tell stories of sexist harassment that are not unlike the ones that her character is subjected to here. So the fact that it's not preachy is doubly incredible when you consider it was made to preach. That was the starting point of it.
Right. Yeah. And apparently they shot some additional stuff that they cut out that was that Fonda thought was just too obvious in the way they were making I think that's interesting too. I'd be curious to see what that was.
It's particularly interesting because, this is 1980, if memory serves. This was made?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. So less than 10 years before Jane Fonda was making Tu Veux Bien with Jean-Luc Godard and his Desiga Vertov group, which is like, I'm a huge Godard fan, and I find that film absolutely impossible to get through. That is a very preachy film, and that is a film where you cannot mistake the fact that it was meant to be talking about labour issues, because it batters you over the head with them. So we've got, before we even get on to the reason why this is being covered on Pop Screen, we've got an interesting snapshot of Jane Fonda, a legend, a hero of mine, in transition. She is not yet fully leg warmers and aerobics Jane Fonda. She is still rooted in activism and in political awareness, but she wants to set about that in a way that's very different to what she was doing 10 years earlier.
Yeah, exactly. I think, just having that kind of populist comedy lens to look at this stuff, and, not to, again, not necessarily preaching about it, but addressing those issues and bringing them up and making them real for the characters, but also like seeing the humor in it. There's a sort of gallows humor in, I think any kind of workplace comedy, but this one in particular, I think really sets the stage for later stuff like your Office Space and the things that people bring up as horrible bosses. I think wouldn't exist without this. Whether or not that's a good thing, I don't know.
Yeah, I kept thinking about The Office, both the UK and the US version, and how interestingly it pictures it. The Office is a mock documentary comedy, so there's kind of a ceiling to how cartoonish it can get. But I think even at 9 to 5's broadest, even when it's Jane Fonda trying to operate this photocopier, which is as big as the Enigma code breaking machine and just spews out paper all over the place, there's a groundedness to it. You recognize what that's making fun of, even if it's an exaggeration of what it's like.
Right. Yeah. I had the thought when during that scene when we were watching it, I'm like, this gag must look ancient to any Gen Z office workers, because who's using Xerox machines, who's got a whole room dedicated to it,
Yes.
But yeah, it almost reminds me of like a modern times kind of, just being swallowed up by the machinery. Fonda's really good in this role, like is this kind of goofy. And what I didn't realize when I was a kid watching this is that she's intentionally playing this kind of dowdy character where, she was a sex symbol. She was, a beautiful woman. And the character she's playing here is so mannered and not her typical type of role. I think she's really good in it. And I think is a good entry point for the audience as like the new person in the office.
Yeah, I think it goes against type twice in a really successful way. As you point out, there is something funny and subversive about seeing the woman who was Barbarella in these sort of big floral dresses and unflattering glasses. But there's also something about, political firebrand Jane Fonda being the sort of naive church mouse who has no idea how bad things are going to get in this office. And I read some articles like around the time it was released, in particular some interviews with Dolly Parton, so we might as well, get onto her now. And she was repeatedly asked, what was it like working with Jane Fonda? Because for a lot of your audience, for a lot of sort of white Southern country music fans in 1980, she is the most hated woman in America to them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but I think by that time Dolly had even, kind of she was trying to expand her audience. She had a couple of crossover hits, I think, by that time in the pop charts. So, maybe this was, and I'm not sure what her answer was to that, but I think my guess would be that was just part of her diversification. Plus, she's always. I don't think Dolly is the kind of person who kind of separates the, her roots from her identity. Like they're the same thing. And her just being an independent woman who has done so much, had so many different roles and done so much in her career. At least in retrospect, you can see where they would have aligned for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious, what did she say?
Well, she turned that around in a very canny way. She said that, to say that she said, I don't agree with everything Jane said in the whole of her life, but to say that we have no common ground is really stereotyping me, and it's stereotyping Southerners, which I think is a really ingenious way of addressing that while also reaffirming your sort of Southern country bona fides.
Sure. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's believing yourself, being an individual, not going with, the herd kind of mentality. So, absolutely, that's definitely part of that.
And Parton is an interesting figure here because, as you say, she made a very concerted effort to break out of the country and Western market and into the pop market, which, nowadays is a pretty well-trodden route. Nowadays, arguably the biggest pop star in the world right now is someone who's done exactly that, which is Taylor
Right.
Swift, of course.
Yeah.
But I think part of the reason why Dolly Parton is so respected now, it's obviously partly because you can look back on her career and realize this is, decades of extraordinary songwriting. That helps. But it's also, there is a current in popular culture right now where you respect people who have that hustle, particularly if they're women, particularly if they're not from a wealthy background. You admire the fact that they did what it takes to get ahead. There were eras of pop music where people did not respect that at all, where people saw that as selling out. And I think how Dolly Parton is regarded partly depends on what stage of pop music we're at. Are we in a sort of grunge, no sellout kind of era, or are we in a poptimist era where we say, yeah, but of course a little girl from the mountains wants to be the biggest pop star in the world. Of course you do whatever it takes to get there. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you think about all the things she's done and
Mm.
how she's made, I was just kind of looking through her credits, singer, songwriter. She plays, I don't know how many different instruments and plays them
Mm.
herself,
Yeah.
um, actor. She hosted a TV variety show. She's been nominated for, the EGOT. She's got all 4 nominations. Theme
Yeah.
park magnet. She's got, Dollywood in Tennessee, which I've never been to, but she's got water parks. She's got dinner theaters. She's got her own philanthropic organization. It's really amazing. And I think, to your point about, the eras and how we view, your pop stars. One thing I think Dolly and, as you mentioned, Taylor Swift, I think have going for them with even people who are a little more, they circle the wagons on the authenticity thing, which is,
Mm.
I'm a late Gen Xer. I can kind of cop to that, but
Yes.
I think even those people can look at the simple fact that these are songwriters. These are performers who are not just, being a mouth for someone else's ideas. They're involved in the production. They're involved in the construction of the songs. They're performing them. And that is a sort of authenticity in itself, and Dolly definitely has that.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I often talk about the first time I became aware of an artist when we're on this show. I'm sure I was always aware of Dolly Parton because she's an inescapable presence in pop culture and has been for the whole of my life. But the first time I remember paying attention to Dolly Parton is she had a song in. I can't remember whether this was the title of the accompanying album, but I distinctly remember the song Little Sparrow in 2000, and that was after a long time where the 90s, as we've hinted, was not really friendly to the whole Dolly ethos. The 90s was about edge and authenticity and messiness. She returned with this very stripped back, mostly acoustic country album that refocused attention on the fact that underneath the image, she is an extraordinary songwriter. And I think it's telling that that was the moment where I sort of thought, oh, right, yeah, Dolly Parton's really good. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that before.
Yeah, yeah, and I would argue that I think her ubiquity kind of worked against her for a period at that time, because
Yeah,
you take those artists for granted because they're always there. They've got the legacy, they've got all the songs, whatever. But sit down and listen to those songs, and there's a reason they stick with you, and in the fact that she still was taking risks, later in her career, like. I think she just put out her first rock album. She was, yeah, she was nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it was
yeah,
initially said, no, I'm not a rock singer, but I guess if you want to honor me, go ahead. So she's in both the country music and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that record's got Lizzo on it and Paul McCartney and all these people. So she's still trying to explore her creativity, even when she doesn't need to be doing that.
Yeah, and you mentioned the ubiquity worked against her. I mean, I'm sure that's the case for anyone who achieves that level of success, but also the image. I mean, nowadays we interpret Dolly Parton's image as being very purposeful, and I think it was always purposeful. One of her first released songs was called Dumb Blonde. She always knew what she was doing, and she could always sort of wink to you about that stereotype. But it poses a particular problem for a movie, because it's like Dolly Parton is already playing a very successful character, and that's Dolly Parton. There is definitely a limit to how many roles you could put her in, and that's nothing to do with her technical skill as an actor. It's to do with what can the audience see and think, oh yeah, that's a sort of Dolly Parton thing. I can imagine Dolly Parton doing that. And I think this film finds a really shrewd one of those.
Yeah, I think that when you think about putting Dolly's persona into this corporate workplace, you can sort of see how it's going to play out, and she so embodies that role. There's not a
Mm,
lot. There's not a lot of lifting on the audience's part. You buy her in there, even if you're thinking you may be thinking to yourself, "Well, how did that interview go? Did she just show up and just charm the pants off them, whatever?" And maybe that's it. But
yeah,
um, they never portray her as anything but competent. You don't see a whole lot of the work that they do that she's doing. I think Lily Tomlin's character gets more of that kind of
yeah,
a characterization, but there's never a point where like you say, she's the dumb blonde, where she's like
mm.
she needs other people to prop her up. Like, she's doing fine by herself. Her barrier is just created by the evil boss.
Yeah. And what I think it chimes particularly well with the Dolly Parton persona is that they do introduce her as that caricature, and Lily Tomlin's character, Violet, is very convinced that she's a bimbo who got ahead by sleeping with the boss. And this proves out to be completely untrue. In fact, when they start to talk about kidnapping the boss, I mean, spoiler if you're completely unfamiliar with the basic concept of 9 to 5 here, by the way, but when they talk about that, she's actually the most resourceful one because of her country background. She has more experience with guns. She's quite cynical towards some of the dumber plans that Violet and Judy come up with. And I think, yeah, again, Partner's just so credible as both halves of these. You understand why Violet would see her in this particular way, but you also need no persuasion to believe that Violet is wrong about her.
Sure, yeah, and it's it kind of gets glossed over in the movie. There's no like apology, I think,
Mm,
Violet for helping to spread that. But I think the vindication is that, first of all, they become friends and they collaborate and everything. But like what they are collectively are able to do for their peers in the workplace, like that, I think is its own vindication that, people aren't going to see her in that role anymore. Obviously, the word spreads that she's not sleeping with the boss and that we were all wrong. But I think it's more than just like her clearing her reputation. They actually build a new one by renovating the office, by introducing all these new policies and things to help the workers. I think all that stuff really goes a long way to kind of mitigating that kind of ugliness at the beginning, where you see her, and nobody wants to sit with her at lunch. Nobody wants to, go out for a drink with her, it's kind of hard to watch actually, because especially once the plot and that, that's not going on, that everybody's just being mean to her on a rumor. I like to see that turnaround for her.
Yeah, and I think it's the sort of thing that has to be raised in order to be dismissed, because in many ways Dolly Parton's sort of image is quite sexualized, and in the context of her actual career, that is diffused by the fact that she isn't a particularly sexual performer or songwriter. But if you're pulling Dolly Parton out from that context and putting her in a film, particularly a film like this, which is explicitly about gender politics, it helps that you have this moment where they sort of acknowledge that people have responded to this person in a way that's kind of depressingly familiar. You do sadly believe that even someone as smart and cynical as Violet gets fooled by, and ends up judging the book by its cover, really. And I think that's a very clever contextualization of Dolly Parton looking like Dolly Parton in a fictional context.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, the way she's able to maintain her image throughout the movie, I think, was also kind of interesting. I was noticing that, as you mentioned, like she's proficient with guns, but she's not like it's not played like she's a tough badass. She just, she has a gun. She's from the South. That's the way it is. The scene where the ladies all get together, are sitting around fantasizing about what they'll do to the boss, and they're smoking a joint from Lily Tomlin's son, who gives it to her. Dolly's just sitting there. She's not smoking with them. She says earlier, that's not for me, and it's never like, it's just, but she's not judging them for doing it either. So she gets to kind of keep that squeaky clean image that she has, but also that kind of magnanimous, I'm not putting on airs. I'm not looking down on you. We're all just having a good time. Sort of. I think that's a kind of an interesting little detail.
Yeah, I think that is too. And I think what it tells us about Dorothy is that she is uncompromising, that she comes into this awful office with a set of values, and whether that means I won't sleep with the boss to get a promotion, or whether it means I won't share a joint with my friends after work, she is absolutely unbending in what she believes.
Yeah, and I think, and that's that gives her a lot of strength, as opposed to Lily Tomlin's character, who is very, she's very sassy, she's very cynical, but competent in the way that she's really the one running the office, and everything gets done better when the boss isn't there. Something, I don't know how many of us can relate to that, but
Well, it's the funniest single cut in the movie, isn't it? Where they're talking about, well, won't people notice if the boss suddenly vanishes? And then it cuts immediately to Dorothy going, hello, no, he isn't in, but I could deal with it if you like. And you realize, this isn't going to make any difference at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to talk about Tomlin or a little bit. I
Yeah.
think she's great in this, and I think when I was younger, she was the strongest impression on me because she's kind of the central character,
Mm.
kind of the one who makes things happen, even though Fonda's our viewpoint character. But yeah, I think she's great in this. I think this part is like so perfect for her persona, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Yeah, we should talk about Tomlin because we've given a good spotlight to two co-stars, and I really like Lily Tomlin. It's always kind of a lift for a film for me when Lily Tomlin appears in it. I'm a huge Robert Altman fan, and of course she's worked with Altman so many times. But she is interesting because I think I understand what you mean about that role making the biggest impression on you. I think if you didn't know who Jane Fonda is, Judy might not register with a viewer that much, which is a testament, I think, to how well Jane Fonda has dismantled her star persona and her star baggage to be part of this group. But Violet's a really like vicariously fun character because she's the cynical one who knows the ropes at the beginning. And if you've had any experience with office work, you can enjoy her bad mouthing all of the shitty parts of it. And then when the plan gets into gear, unlike, as we've said, a resourceful, strong willed Dora Lee, she's the one who gets into really deep shit, and she has to play all of the sort of panicky, farcy bits of it, which is
Mm.
also something that Tomlin is so good at.
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie where at one point they steal a corpse from the hospital and have to try to return it at the last minute when they realize it's the wrong one. And that's that's not the kind of thing you expect from a movie like this. But she's really good at those, like the panic, that kind of humor too. Um,
Mm,
but at no point do we ever really think that she's not in charge. I think even when
mm,
tables start to turn toward the end, where it seems like oh, they're not going to get away with this. Um, the way the script runs is that happens very quickly, and then she immediately kind of gets her comeuppance against her boss at the end there, which is again kind of a sitcom way to wrap up the story, but
yeah.
it's so satisfying. I don't know.
I mean, I love the ending, not least because the Deus Ex Machina is Sterling Hayden, which
Sterling Hayden,
even
right?
though his name comes up in huge letters at the start, it's still extraordinary when he walks in looking like Colonel Sanders and just
Yep.
resolves everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw him in Winter Kills earlier this year. I watched, and
Yes.
he's kind of a similar kind of big, bold, brash character, and yeah, just yeah, definitely brings in some energy at the end that helps lift it up a little bit for sure. I
This
love
was
him.
a stage of his career where he seemed to be taking roles based on, how horrific will the beard I grow be for this part. I don't know if you've seen the documentary that was made around this time about him, Pharos of Chaos.
No.
I mean, it's a great movie. He is so vulnerable in it. It is one of those documentaries about a movie star, which if you pitched it nowadays, an army of publicists would just make sure this thing never got made. But
Hmm.
he is basically living on a barge, looking like an Amish guy. I think the look he has in Winter Kills, if memory serves, is very, very similar to
Hmm.
his street clothes. His 9 to 5 look in this is no pun intended, but
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, he's talking about, World War II. He's talking about masculinity. He's talking about his own alcoholism. It's a really sort of searing, really brave film. And it always adds a bit of an extra layer to these late era performances. I mean, the first time we hear about the chairman, his character is when Violet says she's been working here for 12 years and she's never actually seen him. And by that stage, Sterling Hayden feels like that guy for Hollywood. He was once a big, ubiquitous star, and nowadays, every now and then, he'll just park his barge up in Los Angeles and pop up in a place where you did not expect to see him at all.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that documentary out. That sounds amazing.
It's really good. Yeah, I think if you have any fondness for Hayden at all, it's not a happy documentary, but you respect him so much more for it.
Sure. Yeah, it's great to have those little insights.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you mentioned the scene where they're talking about him early on, and that was something that stood out to me too when on this rewatch, is that in that scene they're also setting up the hierarchy of the office, because they're talking to the mailroom guy. Fonda's character is just getting introduced and being shown around. And it's acknowledged that she's entry level and that she's clearly way below the chairman, but then also has more prestige than the mailroom workers, who's just trying to get some sort of a job in the office. So I think that's a really kind of a neat little scene where they set up that hierarchy really quickly, and sort of the class division of the office.
Again, as we mentioned earlier, it's sort of the Robert Altman bit of the film, isn't it? Where you just have this narrative structure where you're just thrown into this environment and someone has to kind of walk you through it. It's a very elegant way of handling what I think another director could have made, or another writer could have made, into a really boring piece of exposition. In fact, mentioning the writer and mentioning Altman, Patricia Resnick, who wrote this script, started off, her first credit, I think, was Three Women, the Robert Altman film Three Women, which is, that's an abstruse film even by 70s Hollywood standards, but I do love it.
Well, this is another film about three women. So,
yeah.
It makes sense. I was looking into her credits, and I wasn't familiar with her, but I noticed that, and I noticed the director, who I think kind of co-wrote the script, had previously written Harold and Maude.
I didn't know that. That's good.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. I wasn't sure where he came from, but he. I think this was one of his early directorial works, and then he went on to work with Dolly on The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which they made after this.
Which again is, the perfect Parton role, isn't it, in terms of her image? You want someone who can believably be a Texan brothel madam, but is also so squeaky clean that you can get a mainstream audience to see this.
Right, yeah. I think, she was just looking at her roles in general, she was good at like picking those roles that, never belittled her, never made her into the butt of a joke. She was always kind of in charge. Even like the one she did after that was the infamous Rhinestone, where she's got to train Sylvester Stallone to become a country singer, and again, how successful, I don't know, but
I was going to say, it's worth pointing out that the thing that didn't work about Rhinestone definitely isn't Parton's fault, and it should be pretty obvious what the problem was.
Right. But again, like her character in that too. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but from what I remember, she's in charge. She gets herself into this stupid bet, and so she just goes with it. And I think that, she hasn't done a ton of roles, and I think the ones that she have really played into that persona and played up to her strengths, much like this one did.
I don't know if we'll do a pop screen episode on The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, so I might as well dump one of my favorite pieces of movie trivia of all time in this episode, which is during the early stages of the Video Nasties scare in the UK, police seized quite a lot of copies of The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. because their only instruction was to go into video shops and seize anything that might be considered illegal. And the tagline to the best little whorehouse in Texas was, "With Bert and Dolly, this much fun can't be legal." So they were like, "Oh my God, they admit it."
That's great. Oh, oh, the censors. Yeah, I never get tired of hearing video nasty lore, to be honest. Like, I know it was a horrible time for
Yeah.
everybody involved, but it's just amazing some of the decisions that were made at that time.
Yeah, in retrospect, the fact that there was like a national panic over the Clint Howard vehicle evil speak is one of the funniest things in
Oh,
British
yeah.
history.
Yeah, I mean, Bert and Dolly, I'm sure, right up there with Cannibal Holocaust and, Last House on the
That
Left,
level Dolly
so,
caused.
yeah. Oh, man. you know, and and I can't say I wouldn't love to see her in a movie like that,
Mm,
but it's never going to happen. So
no, no. But you're right that there was a moment there where you would have bet very strongly for Dolly Parton to have a movie career that rivaled her musical one. In part because, as we've said, every other barrier that seemed to be going against her she just ploughed through and been completely successful with.
yeah. I mean, I think it was she was probably very choosy about her roles. I think
Mm,
that's got to be it, because again, when you look at that, what they were and how many there were, it all did kind of they were all believable roles for her. They kind of centered around her public persona and what she put out there. So, I mean, how many roles are there like that for her that
yeah.
she got offered?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I'm sure there were a lot of things coming in that did not click with the Dolly persona as perfectly as her work with Colin Higgins did. There's a movie she did later on, which is like probably one of the last attempts at sort of. I know she does a lot of sort of Christmas movies now where she turns up as Dolly Parton usually.
Right.
One of her later attempts at like actual character acting was a film called Straight Talk, which was
Mhm.
also written by Patricia Resnick, and it starred Dolly Parton and James Woods. And imagine the on-set banter. What a
Oh,
strange set that would have been.
yeah. I'm sure Dolly just kept to herself, and probably for the best. I remember when that came out, but I've never seen it. Um,
Same. No,
yeah.
I've never seen it. I think I looked it up because the same reason I looked Higgins up, but I thought with Resnick, you think someone cannot turn in a script that's this good and this funny and have it be a hit and just vanish. And she didn't just vanish, but it feels like she should have more respect than she does. Comedy writing is one of the few things about making comedy films that critics and awards bodies seem to understand. Generally, if there's a comedy in the running for the Oscars, you can safely predict that it's going to go away empty-handed, except for best original screenplay. People seem to accept that that takes talent, and I just it's strange to me that Resnick could turn in a hit like this and still be undervalued. It seems.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's such a smart but effortless movie.
Mm.
So yeah, I am kind of curious. I'm going to do a little deep dive after we finish talking, and probably maybe dig up some more stuff she worked on.
Yeah, there's got to be something more in this. Higgins for a while seemed to be Fonda's like go-to person in this sort of quest she had to make movies that had a message but were mainstream. She like automatically went to him for 9 to 5 as soon as she had that idea. She decided this is the guy who can do it.
Yeah, and I mean, it worked for sure. I mean,
Mm,
he's I think the Harold and Maude piece really kind of clicked for me because um, there's a darkness and an anger in the comedy here that never
Mm,
wins out, but definitely I could see another filmmaker kind of sanding down some of those edges, and
yes.
maybe not with the star being the producer kind of guiding that, but
Mm.
yeah, I think the sensibilities are really well aligned.
I think part of the reason why it works so well is having the late Dabney Coleman as Hart, which is it's always very difficult playing an outright villain in a comedy, I think, because you have to calibrate, this guy has to be a threat, and we can't make light of the sexual harassment that he's dishing out to his employees, in large part because that's the reason why Fonda is making the movie.
Mm.
But he can't be so nasty that it kills the comedy, that it sours the whole movie. And I think he walks that line exemplary, in an exemplary fashion.
Yeah, he's perfect.
Mm,
He's such a greaseball, but you also like you you know he's kind of a incompetent anyway. You know the whole reason
yeah,
that I mean it's part of their conflict with him is that he's taking their ideas and claiming them as his own, and that he's acting like he's a big shot, but he honestly can't do anything himself. He's really good at that, and I think that he kind of had that. I talk about a guy who was really kind of loomed over my childhood. Like I remember him very well from War Games, from Cloak and Dagger. Some of this stuff that was on cable a lot when I was a kid, and including this. And I always remember him really strongly in this, just because he's such a you hate him, but you also like know he's not going to win in a way because he's
yeah,
just can't. He's just too incompetent, and the story's not on his side. It's not that kind of a movie.
yeah.
But yeah, R.I.P. Dabney Coleman just passed away a week before we recorded this.
Yeah, and I mean, what a career! Something like 175 screen credits. It's yeah, it's hard not to tip your hat to those hard-working character actors who, when they get their little moment, when they get their role that they'll be remembered for, they always know exactly what to do with it.
Yeah, he deserves to be remembered for this for sure.
I mean, if only because of how fearless he is with it. I mean, not just sort of in terms of playing a character who is so unlikable and who is there, to be have rings run round him by the female cast members. Although I can imagine a lot of Hollywood men in the early '80s would turn it down because of that. But physically fearless as well, in that he spends quite a lot of the last act of the movie suspended from a ceiling, wearing bondage gear.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, like the pulley system they have rigged up for
yeah,
him. Uh, yeah, he has to do a lot of stuff, like in those fantasy sequences where he's being hunted by Jane Fonda, or kind of
mm,
roped, and he gets his head put on stuffed and put on a wall. There's a lot of images where he's just getting beat up, um, being the patsy. He's just kind
mm,
of he's not afraid to look foolish,
yeah,
which again kind of undercuts um, some of his authority and gives us some confidence that he's not going to win in the end.
yeah.
But he's so confident and cocky about it. I don't know. Again, I think he's great in this.
I think that's part of what makes him what makes him hit that acceptable level of nastiness, in that his cockiness is so flagrantly out of line with his actual abilities, and that even before we get the actual kidnap plot, you just think, oh yeah, a woman like Violet can easily outwit this guy. There's no contest.
And I think by the same kind of argument, I think that those fantasy sequences really go. I mean, that's probably my favorite part of the movie for sure. Like
Same. Yeah.
the animated kind of fairy tale setup with Lily Tomlin, and but it did raise the question because the character. Um, it's what they're fantasizing what they could do against him, you know. But I feel like going back to Dolly, I think that her fantasy is a little suspect because I think they're implying that this, you know, I mean, he's obviously a philanderer and a dirtbag. But are we supposed to believe that this guy would not want to be sexually harassed and spit roasted by Dolly Parton? You know, like I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, oh, he'd probably enjoy this fantasy.
Yes.
You know?
There is that. I think maybe that's part of Dorothy's innocence in that she's thinking of this and thinking, oh, wow, that'll really humiliate him, and not thinking, oh, yeah, he'll like that.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, I never thought of that before. I watched it the other day. So
I do, as you say, I really like those fantasy sequences too. And I
yeah,
think it's, again, another really nice piece of characterization that Violet, who's introduced to us as the cynic, has this sort of innocent, cartoonish kind of Disney princess fantasy, that Judy actually turns out to have this simmering rage underneath her, and Dorothy treats it like you expect Dorothy to, because what you see with Dorothy is exactly what you get.
yep. She takes charge of the situation.
I also like the fact that Judy's sort of action movie version of Revenge on Heart is like, it basically predicts modern action movies, doesn't it? It's got that really desaturated Zack
Yeah,
Snyder kind of look to it.
I was gonna say, like, while I was rewatching it the other day, I was thinking, you know, well, this really looks modern. Like
Yeah.
I don't know that how intentional that was, but like you said, it's desaturated. It looks different from the rest of the film, probably because it's the signal. It's a fantasy, but
Yeah.
yeah, really interesting.
I'm sure they did it purely so you could cut into it and recognize that it wasn't real, but it is very
Mm,
funny that they like accidentally predicted what films are going to look like in about 40 years' time. Yeah.
right, right.
Um, yeah, so are there any other things about either 9 to 5 or Dolly Parton that we ought to address before we sign out?
Well, one thing I just wanted to throw out there because it's something I had forgotten about until I was doing a little research for this, is that
Mm.
they turned this into a TV series. There was a sitcom.
Ah, right.
And when I read that, I was like, oh, I don't remember. Oh, maybe I do. And I guess it ran for 5 seasons. And originally, Rita Moreno was in the Lily Tomlin role,
Wow.
and Dolly's sister, Rachel Dennison, actually played her character.
Huh.
Um, and so that was like, I think they had various permutations of the cast. I want to say Jeffrey Tambor was the boss originally, and
Right.
he got replaced. But yeah, really interesting that like it was on for a long time and no one remembers it, including me. um, and yeah, it's just that this film had that kind of lasting legacy. That show ran well into the 1980s. Like I think it finished in '88 or something like that. So
Right. That
um,
that is very strange. Yeah, when you said it, I thought, all right, so they did a pilot and it flopped, but no, yeah, 5 seasons will get you into syndication, right?
yeah, I think the first couple were done for a network, and then they revived it a little later, strictly
Right.
as a syndicated series. So it was on what were cable superstations now, WTBS out of Atlanta. At least in the states, that's where it ran. So it was
Right.
out there, and I maybe remember it, but not very strongly. So
Yeah.
it's just interesting that sort of thing happened a lot with hit movies.
In terms of being transplanted into other mediums, of course, there was a successful stage musical of
Yes.
it, which is sort of inevitable because I'd forgotten that the movie does treat the title song as a kind of musical motif. It fades away in the second half when they need more dramatic music to get the sort of crime plot line through. But for most of the first half, if you hear some incidental music, it is like based on that famous piano riff for a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or even like the montages where, it's just kind of playing in the background. Yeah,
Mm.
Dolly supposedly came up with that song on the set, like tapping her fingernails and coming up with the rhythm while she was working on the movie. So it just,
Yeah. I mean,
uh,
that is, if you ask people, what do you know about Dolly Parton now, it always seems to be something about her, this incredible work ethic or this incredible songwriting ability. People will quote that fact that she wrote "I Will Always Love You" in the same night that she wrote Jolene. They'll
yeah,
talk about her reading programs or the day when they found out that her production company made Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
yeah, yeah.
It's it's
Or
funny
they
how
named Dolly the sheep after her.
I'd forgotten that one.
Yeah, yeah. The clone sheep, clone from a sheep's mammary gland.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
But it's I think it's a testament that she has this cartoonish image that is deliberately cartoonish and was designed to be something that sticks in people's minds. And yet everything people talk about when they talk about Dolly Parton now, to one of Raymond Carver's less successful books, that's what we talk about when we talk about Dolly Parton. But whenever people talk about her now, it's because of the woman, it's because of the substance, not the style.
yep. And that's why we'll always love her.
Nice. Yes. I wish I had another podcast tonight so I could say that I recorded that podcast in the same night that I also recorded. Yeah, nothing.
Right?
Um, so yes, Jeff, just give people a reminder of where people can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me on letterboxd.com. I am under the name Scrambled Face. You will find my long, sometimes way behind reviews of everything I've written since December 2014. So, yeah, I'd love to see you there. And also follow Graham there because he's one of the best writers out there. I'm just
Oh,
throwing
thank
that
you.
out there.
Well, I am on Letterboxd, as Jeff so kindly pointed out. I am also on Instagram at Graham W Film, and of course, you can find me on the Geek Show. You can also donate to the Geek Show Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show, where you get a bonus episode of this show every month. I think if this goes out when I'm planning it to, our next Patreon exclusive episode will be about the fanatic unfilm De Fred Durst.
Ooh,
So
that's
fans
been on
of
my watch list for a while.
fans of me suffering, and I know there's a lot of them out there, will certainly get a kick out of that. But until then, we'll be back on this free feed in a fortnight's time, and we'll see you then.
Bye.